Welcome to the Tipping Point Show. I'm Jimmy Evans. I am so glad that you've joined me today. I have coming back to join me again today my dear friend, Rabbi Jonathan Cahn. He is a New York Times best-selling author of many books. He leads Hope of the World Ministry. It's an international outreach of teaching, evangelism, and compassion projects for the world's most needy. He also leads the Jerusalem Center Beth Israel, a worship center made up of Jews and Gentiles, people of all backgrounds, just outside of New York City in Wayne, New Jersey. He's joining me today to talk about his book, Return of the Gods, and also we're going to be talking about some of the current events happening in America and the world right now. Rabbi, thank you for joining me today.
Great, always great to be back.
Love having you here. You bring such an incredible perspective. You know, we're just living in unique times. There's never been a time in the history of the world that you could compare to what we're living in now. Thank God that the Bible tells us about this, tells us what's going to happen. But the Return of the Gods, we talked about this on the last show. Give us a synopsis, if you would, about this book. Fabulous book, New York Times bestselling book. But just kind of give us a synopsis of what God spoke to you. The ultimate mystery of the Return of the Gods is, could there be a real, not just a general thing that's happening, transforming our culture, but could there be actually a mystery that goes back to the Bible, back to a warning that Jesus gave, and the ancient gods of the Middle East, we be actually dealing now with these principalities? And the ultimate warning that Jesus gave, that if you take a culture takes God out that has known God, these other spirits will come back, will return to it that were once there, which are basically paganism, are pagan spirits. So what the Return of the Gods is showing, that it's not just a general thing, it's exact, it's specific. We can actually identify the gods or spirits that have come back, the same that are mentioned in the Bible, and to see how they have exactly transformed our culture. I speak about a dark trinity of gods, and the first is called the possessor, second the enchantress, third is the destroyer. We touched on that, but they've affected everything from the sexual revolution to the paganization of our culture, to the 60 million plus babies we have lifted up. All of it, what's happening to our children right now, what every Christian, every believer is dealing with right now, and it affects even what we're dealing right now with gender, with the destruction of gender, which is in the news almost every day now. That is part of this mystery. Okay, I want to talk about that because, see, Paul talked about in 2 Thessalonians, he said that the Thessalonians were worried that the rapture had happened and they had been left behind. So Paul is comforting them, and he says the return of Jesus isn't going to come until the falling away takes place. So you believe that the destruction of gender that we're seeing today is a part of the apostasy?
Oh, total. One of the, what we're watching, one of the sure signs of prophecy is the great falling away that a lot of people kind of overlook. This is every day, and we're witnessing it too. And the Return of the Gods is about that. When you fall away, it doesn't stay empty. Something else, things come back into it, and that's where the Bible says in the last days there will be seducing spirits. And we're dealing with that. So gender, one of the things that interesting, that when you look at the creatures of Daniel, the last creature in Hebrew, it says this one is diverse from all the rest. The word in Hebrew is shaneh, which means altered. It can mean different or altered. Whoa. It can mean artificial. Whoa. It can mean not natural. Well, what we're watching is what is not natural. So we're watching a war against everything that is natural. And one of the things is, of course, that's the enemy's end game. Destroy creation. You can destroy the image of God and marriage and all. Well, one of the three principalities that we spoke of last time as the enchantress, the god of the sexual revolution, and the Bible speaks about this one. Well, also there's something strange about her. It says in the ancient tablets, it says that she says, "I am a woman, I am a man." One of the hymns says, "You have the power," this one, "to turn a man into a woman into a man."
Oh my!
This is what we know. This goddess as Ishtar or Torah. She's the goddess also of androgyny. She blends, she breaks the bonds of gender. And so what would happen? Now, here's the thing, Jimmy.
this is a deeper work. When she first shows up, in a sense, you have the sexual revolution. You couldn't have all this now because it was too radical. But the sexual revolution was leading to this. It was always going to lead to this.
Yeah.
The destruction of marriage is leading to this. When you take man and woman apart, when you basically say it's not necessary, this is what you get.
Right.
So here's the thing. It says she grinds away the masculinity of men. Well, we're watching that in our culture, a war against men, a war, everything if a man is masculine, it's toxic. If a woman is masculine, bravo. It's a war against men. It's the emasculating of men and fathers and fatherhood and husbands. On the other hand, it says she defeminizes women. And so we're also watching that too, to take women away from motherhood, away from marriage, away from femaleness, femininity. But she had an ancient priesthood, and her priesthood consisted of men walking around in her temples dressed up as women. Well, when you see that come back, the gods have returned. And so this is what we are watching now. When you start seeing, it's not natural. You see now men dressing up as women, and the culture celebrates it.
Oh, yeah.
This was part of the pagan world.
Yeah.
We only got away from it because of the gospel. This is all that. So, and not only that, but it says that some of her priests, she would actually have surgically transitioned.
Wow.
Surgically transitioned from men to women. I put it in the book, in the Return of the Gods, that I put the inscriptions, that I found a description of the transition men that she did, and they're dancing before her, holding scalpels as if to celebrate their surgery. Now remember something we spoke about in the other show, that we said that Jesus said when they come back, these spirits come back worse, back then she possessed a priesthood. She had a priesthood. She turned their gender. But today she's seeking to possess an entire generation of children.
Yes.
And so that is what's happening. We're dealing with it right now.
So, I mean, I'm so shocked. I can't even. So there was a video that I showed on the show here, Matt Walsh interviewing a man who believed he was a wolf. Now, he completely believed he was a wolf. And Matt said, "So you're a wolf?" And he said, "I'm a trans woman wolf Syrian." And he said, "Well, when did you realize you were a wolf?" He said, "I was watching this documentary on television about wolves." He said, "I realized that's me." So he identifies, these are called furries. There's a whole generation of them now. We have children going to school as cats and dogs and foxes and wolves and things like that. And they don't stop them in many cases because they say it's a part of their queer identity. Now, that's their term. They say it's a part of their queer identity. So this is being protected. The state of California last year passed a law. If a child can reach California, we will take emergency custody of them. We will invalidate the parental rights of the parent and the state that they're from, and we will protect them while they go through the process of transition. And so this is when you said, when you allow this, when you reject God and you allow this is the end game. Okay, so we now have not just people saying they're changing their sex. It's called transspeciesism. Now they're saying I can change my species. That's the level of deception this has gotten to.
Yeah, it's exactly what you say. One of the forms of gender of paganism is it also. We didn't speak about this, but it blurs the line between man and animal. Look at what you see in the pagan world. What images? You see images of half man, half animal. Baal himself was part bull, part man. Yeah. And you see this, the gods were. So now you have the line between man and animal being blended, not just in clay or stone, but actually in identity and in also by the genetic code.
Wow.
All these things it's kind of like paganism on steroids, is what we're dealing with. And so, and by the way, this goddess is the goddess who in every possible way breaks down every every line of definition.
Yes.
And that's what we're seeing right now. But absolutely, and it's madness. It's truly madness, but it's also pagan, and it's also all goes back to this. When you look at the pagan world, you had people actually identifying with animals as well. The ancient Germanic pagans, that basically the Nazis model themselves on, they identified as wolves. They identified as bears. That's where we get the word berserk from. People who wore bear shirts. But this is this is the return of it.
Oh gosh. So talk about what happened on the White House lawn, because this, we were talking about the Defensive or the Respect for Marriage Act, which was a sham. Talk about that.
Yeah. Well, one of the things is, when you look at, first of all the Supreme Court decisions that have basically ended marriage as we know it, and have changed sexuality. There were three major ones from 2003 to 2015 when marriage was struck down as we know it. Every single one of them happened at the time linked to this goddess. Every single one.
Whoa.
The goddess, this goddess had one time of the year that she especially possessed the culture. And that time was what the time is identified by the ancient Christian writers, and even St. Jerome, I put it in the book, identifies it. It was the month of June. June was the month where she actually possessed the culture. You had parades. You had parades of men dressed as women parading through the city streets, and women. That's exactly what we're having now. And June. And by the way, Jimmy, another sign of this is what gets to the White House. Remember the day that marriage was struck down? And of course you do. But on that day, the White House was lit up in the colors of the rainbow.
Yes.
Well, you know what the sign of this goddess was? The rainbow.
Oh my God.
The rainbow.
Oh my God.
So, and you say, it's God's sign, but she's also the goddess in her mythology that steals the signs of other gods and claims it for herself. So the rainbow was. They don't. And it's not like they know what they're doing, but that's the ultimate thing. And let me tell you one other thing, Jimmy. With that, and I'll get to the White House. But what happened in the last White House with Obama is that he lit up the rainbow that night. On the Bible calendar and on the Babylonian calendar was the 10th day of Tammuz, 10th of Tammuz. The month. Now, Tammuz was a lover of this goddess, by the way.
Wow.
And the 10th day of Tammuz, I looked at the ancient Babylonian records, and it says that the 10th day of Tammuz is especially appointed to cast a spell to cause a man to love a man. That was the day that marriage was transformed.
Oh my God!
And they have no idea. Well, recently, this is after the book, Jimmy. Of course, the book came out in September, the Trinity Gods, and then this just happened on the White House lawn. That Biden, he had this big celebration for the first time. For the first time, he took with the Supreme Court decision, but he now enshrined it into federal law with the so-called Respect for Marriage Act. Of course, it's the opposite. It's the disrespect of marriage. Right. And so he had thousands of LGBT activists there, and he lit up the White House in the color of the rainbow. And basically, the law says that that everyone must respect these marriages. Now we must respect now God respects real marriage, but there's only one case in the entire Bible where God does not respect marriage, and that is in Ezra, when the Israelites sinned against God, and he says these marriages, because you went against my will, they are not legitimate. I will not respect the marriages, and they have to be repented of, and so here's the thing, Jimmy, that the day, when Biden lit up the White House again with the colors of the rainbow to seal it, celebrate it, Respect for Marriage Act, that day on the biblical calendar was the day that God said, I will not respect these marriages.
That's amazing.
Yes. And,
oh my God.
And, it's like God has the last word. He knows how to do that. But that's the exact day. And let me throw in one. I'll throw in one more. But here's the interesting thing about lighting up with the rainbow. Do you know? It's actually not natural how this sign of the rainbow has spread through our culture.
No,
it's not natural.
Yeah. No.
It's not natural for American embassies to be flying any other flag.
Yeah.
It's not natural for our children's cereal boxes to have rainbows on. It's crazy. But it was the sign that the goddess was possessing you. And so now the president is kind of giving the White House and saying, now America is basically saying we're giving it into the hands of the Spirit. Here's the White House. And here's another thing with this, and it's a big thing, because when our culture was depaganized, when the gospel came in, Constantine and all that, basically all these pagan signs were replaced by the sign of the cross. And what he heard, he said he saw a vision of, in this sign of the cross, in the sign conquer, and it was the cross, and that was the symbol of a new culture. This was it. Well, now notice we're watching the removal of crosses all across America, and it's being replaced with a sign of the rainbow, which is actually linked to this goddess of the pagan world. And so it's now in this sign conquer is what they're seeking to do. Well, he lit up the White House. But let me tell you one other thing, which I don't even have a chance to reveal, but that's why I'm blessed to be on this with you, because these are hot things, but they're very important. And here's the thing, in the Respect for Marriage Act, they put a little clause saying, well, we won't force churches to perform. Well, they put it in. When a CBS News reporter went up to the White House press secretary and said, well, isn't this discrimination? And she didn't say, no, this is religious freedom. You have to have that. She said, well, basically, we're just beginning. This is just the beginning. In other words, that's how it starts. You can opt out, but then they remove the opting out.
That's right.
Well, so they were sure, there won't be persecution. But here's another thing. There was a day in the Bible where a king signed a proclamation that went out to the nation that actually led to the persecution, or was to lead to the persecution of God's people. Okay, you see it in the book of Esther. It was the 13th day of the 12th month. Okay, well, the day that the Respect for Marriage Act, but they said, oh, don't worry about persecution. The day that it was December 13th, the 13th day of the 12th month.
Oh my!
So
gosh.
Be warned. Be warned.
One of the things that you do that it's just God, beginning with the Harbinger 2, the book Paradigm, and I was telling you this earlier, the book Paradigm is just the most unbelievable parallel between Ahab and Jezebel and Bill and Hillary Clinton and all this stuff. It's mind-boggling, because one of the things that you do is you go back to the day. See, we think that we're enlightened and we're inventing all this stuff for the first time, and we're in this new age of enlightenment. We're doing the same stupid stuff that got Israel destroyed the first time.
Yeah, and that's one of the, Jimmy, what's one of the parallels, all these things are part of Israel's last days, whether it's the Harbinger, whether it's the Paradigm, that was also part of the nation that was falling from God, whether it's the return of the gods, this is the spiritual part of it, but one of the things is, I'm amazed by it. We were talking off air, but I'm amazed as much as anything. It's so exact, and this is really it's God showing I'm in charge. My fingerprint. You may do what you think you're doing, but in the end, I'm the last word, and my purposes will be done. Example for that one, with Bill Clinton, and we saw the parallel of Ahab. Ahab is on the national stage for 22 years. Bill Clinton is on the national stage for 22 years. Hillary Clinton was with her husband on the stage for 22 years, and when you add the time on her own, it ends up being 14 years. Jezebel was 22 years with her husband, 14 years after that on the national stage. There's a crisis and a scandal in Ahab's kingdom, and when you take the exact time, 19th year, you actually it leads to an exact year and exact day of a scandal breaking out. It goes to January 20th, 1998. That's the day that the scandal of the presidency, Monica Lewinsky, broke out. And then if you look at the biblical paradigm, you take 3 years from that date, it goes to the end of Ahab's rule. 3 years from that date is the end of the Clinton years. And not only that, I'll throw just one more. And by the way, I will say this, Jimmy, and we'll probably could do this in the future, but it has not stopped coming true. Even January 6th, what happened on Capitol Hill is in the template of the paradigm. But we won't have time. But let me just say one thing with the exactness of God. There was one day that Clinton actually repented. This is the only time he said at a prayer break, he said, I have sinned. He finally broke down and said a few months later, if you take that, when you take in the paradigm from the moment that Ahab says I've sinned to the moment of a calamity comes on it, it's 3 years to the exact day. Well, when you take 3 years from when he did that, it leads you to September 11th, 2001,
Oh, gosh.
to the exact hour.
Oh gosh, that is amazing. So that brings me to the issue of the Shemitah, because I know that you said that something happened last year, which was a Shemitah year, that continues the mystery of the Shemitah.
Yeah. Yeah, and by the way, Jim, I've never shared this anywhere. I mean, this is, when I think of Shemitah, I think of you. For some reason, we talk about it. But yeah, now the first thing for those who know about the Shemitah, and first of all, I always put in from the beginning, I put in the caution. Listen, God doesn't have to do anything. You can't put him in a box. Nothing has to happen. But be ready, be aware. But the Shemitah is the 7-year mystery, the 7-year the ordination of God. That on the 7th year, debts are wiped out. It's an economic wipeout. It's all that. Now it's a blessing. But when you turn away from God, this thing actually becomes a countdown for judgment in the Bible, the 77s of death,
Right.
the whole thing. But so the point is, it's not that it has to happen, but it happened again. But when 2001, you had, 2008, and on the exact day of the Shemitah, you had the greatest wipeouts in history. 2015 was also, it wasn't, the most dramatic was 2001 and 2008, but 2015 was also the next time that you had the stock market go into the red. It hadn't happened since 2008. Losses. You had some of the greatest crashes in all the other markets or trade. China collapsed by half a. But now, 2022, what happened? Did anything happen? Yeah, it happened. 2022 was the worst year of the stock market since 2008, the Shemitah of 2008. It was the worst year of the bonds and stocks since the Great Depression. It was the worst. The thing about it was the worst year in the bond market. Okay, usually if the stock market crashes, the bond market will stay.
Yeah.
Bond markets are but this year both of them crashed, and it was the worst year for the bond market in the history of the bond market.
Oh my God!
This Shemitah absolutely was the worst year ever. It was the worst year of stocks and bonds combined, the global market in history as well. Lost about $30 trillion. The markets like the NASDAQ and the S&P were down 20%, 30%. People don't realize it was, and you had the Bitcoin crash. It was one of the, some people said it was the worst year ever because it affected everything. But yeah, it happened again. And the Shemitah began in 2021 in September. By January, the stock market reversed itself, and it was going down since then. Then, when you get to the peak, that Elul 20 at the very end is the peak. You had a crash all over on that week that brought every market into the bear market on the week of the Shemitah. Now after that was over, only afterwards you start seeing recovery. Now we don't know what's going to happen after, but yeah, I've never shared this anywhere, Jimmy, but actually it came back in full force.
Wow. Well, that's the reason that you're the one that originally was talking about the Shemitah in 2001, 2008, 2015, now again on 2022.
Yeah.
So let me switch gears a little bit. I want to talk a little bit about Israel. And I know you're very connected to Israel. What is happening there right now in this morning's newspaper, Israel's wanting to annex the Jordan Valley. They're wanting to build 10,000 more houses in Judea and Samaria. That's been condemned by the United States, Canada, France, England. So there's a tension building. Joel chapter 3, God says, in those days at that same time when I bring back the captives of Judah and Jerusalem, I'm going to enter into the judgment with the nations in the valley of Jehoshaphat for the way they've treated my heritage, my people Israel, and they've divided up my land. And so this is something that we see happening, the division of the land of Israel, which ultimately Armageddon is about Jerusalem. Armageddon is about the division of the land of Israel. Okay, and there's going to be the worldwide outcry against Israel because they're not going to give up Jerusalem. I don't believe they ever will. But what do you see right now in current events in Israel? What do you think is happening related to the end times?
Well, one is exactly what you say, that the controversy over Israel never ends. And here is a the Jewish people said, if we could just get back to Israel, all our problems will be solved. The reason why the world hates us is because we don't have a nation. We're not like the others. Once we get back, we're going to have peace. Well, the Bible says something very different.
Yeah.
And that's what happened. So it never stops. I mean, since you and I probably were kids, there's never a time that Israel is not out of controversy. That's amazing. I mean, how many other stories are like that? I mean, the Cold War is gone.
Yeah.
But look at that. It's still the same. And it's progressed. So yeah, that's one thing that what the Bible says. The other, and as you said, the end game is Jerusalem. Jerusalem is always the center of all this. Now in the time of, I don't know if you've been there recently, Jimmy, but I'm sure you have.
We were there in December, last December. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And one of the things that I don't know if you notice it, I noticed it, but when I first came, when I would go on the Temple Mount, there was like you couldn't have the slightest thing. I mean, they're still very tough, but you couldn't do it. But now we've actually prayed on the top. There are actually Jewish people praying on the top. They've kind of lightened up, and there's more and more talk about even in the Knesset and even about the possibility of restoring the Temple Mount, which is ultimately what it has to be for prophecy to come true.
Right.
So things have never stopped with that. It's almost like a spotlight. First the spotlight's on Israel, then it's got to go into Jerusalem, which it has, then it's got to go to the Temple Mount.
Right.
And there's more and more talk about that. There's been more and more action on that. The fact that even what we saw with Donald Trump, and we cannot minimize that to any degree. What he did was historic and was gigantic.
Absolutely.
And was prophetic. It was the first time a world leader since ancient times specifically recognized Jerusalem for the Jewish people.
Yeah.
And so this is and by the way, let me throw something out of it. But I wrote the book called The Oracle about that. But one thing about that is that, to America, Trump, and we'll see what happens in this election, but America, Trump is a Jehu in every way. And as we spoke, to Israel, he's a Cyrus,
right,
because he did what he did. But the interesting thing is, remember it says Cyrus, it says after 70 years, it was his first year, he came to world power in his first year. After 70 years, he recognized Jerusalem. He told them he could go back, build a house. Well, when you look at there's a date that actually the world separated Jerusalem from Israel. It was actually the date when the United Nations voted that they would have an Israel again, but they separated Jerusalem legally in that same day, in November, with that declaration. So ever since then, legally, the entire world, including the United States, said no Jerusalem for Israel. Well, that lasted until Trump did what he did.
Yes.
Now, when you take the Hebrew calendar from the day of that UN decision, the separation of Jerusalem, you take 70 years, and it says in the Bible, after 70 years, then Cyrus issued the proclamation. The day after that, you take 70 years exactly, day after is the day that Trump issued the declaration of Jerusalem. So God has his way, and no matter what happens, no matter what the world says, no matter what the United Nations says, Israel is not moving, and Jerusalem is not moving. And our eyes need to be on the Temple Mount, because we know it, and that is where it's all converging.
Well, we were there in December, and we went through the Temple Institute. I don't know if you've ever been through there,
yes,
but fascinating tour through there. And they began by saying, these are not replicas. These are not just lookalikes. These are kosher. All of the instruments, all of the musical instruments, all of the wardrobe for the priest, these are all kosher, and these will be used in the third temple. And one of the things that was very interesting, Rabbi, when we were leaving, the last thing we saw was a replica of the Ark of the Covenant. And they said, we know the location of the Ark, and when the time comes, we'll go get it. And so what I believe was that when you look at, I have a rabbi on the show, Mark Biltz from Washington State.
Yes.
But we talk about the blood moons. In 1949 and 1950, that was the Holy Land. In 1967, 68, that was the Holy City. But then in 2014 and 2015, there were also the tetrad of blood moons. I believe in 2014 and 15, it was the Holy Temple, because that's about the time that there was a tremendous activity, increase in activity and freedom for the Jews on the Temple Mount. And I don't know the timing of this, but you know as well as I know, there's going to be a rebuilt temple. At some point in time. Let me ask you one more question before I let you go. What do you think about Iran? Obviously Ezekiel 38 and 39 we're seeing that war unfold. Now, we don't know exactly when it's going to happen.
Yeah.
Iran has now a hypersonic missile that can reach Israel in 400 seconds, 6.66 minutes. They believe that the Israelis believe that they're very close to enriching enough uranium to have a nuclear weapon, which obviously this is an existential threat to Israel. They cannot wait to get attacked by Iran. What do you think about what's going on?
Yeah, major. Well, Jimmy, when I was just coming to the Lord, and it was prophecy that led me to the Lord. I picked up the late great planet Earth. I was an atheist. I picked up the late planet Earth. That got me started. And I went to this prophecy thing. I wasn't a believer. I have a Jewish guy coming in there, and they're speaking about Iran, about the prophecy of Ezekiel 38 and 39, and it clearly says Persia, and we know it's Iran. And somebody stood up and said, it's never going to happen. Iran is one of the biggest allies of Israel and America. And I remember a guy, that was back then, a guy stood up and said, you know what? He said, it says the Bible says this, so something's going to happen. And sure enough, just a few years later came the revolution.
Right.
And so God, you never bet against God or his prophecy. Yeah. So there it is. So here you have Iran, which actually, it's almost like the devil always uses things that, here was a nation that actually blessed Israel at one point, blessed Israel with the return of Israel. Actually, the Lord has, the Abraham covenant has only allowed Iran to stay on. It's the only one of those great powers that actually stayed on intact, because it was the only one of those powers that allowed Israel to come back.
Wow.
So God honors that, but then the enemy's going to use it. Clearly, Ezekiel gives speaks of Russia, and people try to kind of that's that area. It's Russia. It's that area. You have that. You have Turkey, Togarmah, and they're in alliance now. And you have Iran, and they're considered the most dangerous nation now. And so it really, I don't think we've ever seen these things fall into place with Ezekiel 38 and 39 as far as alliances ever as we're seeing now. There's one thing. Remember, there's one thing in Daniel where he says that he's praying, and the angel comes to him and says, "I was fighting. I was delayed because of the prince of Persia,
right.
the Tsar Paras, which is a specific entity. Speaking about the gods or the spirits, a specific entity which is devoted to Persia or to Iran, and this is a demonic entity. And so now, when Iran turned against Israel, this entity, you talk about the gods. If I had to do an Iranian version of the Return of the Gods, look what happened to them.
Yeah.
They became the most, and they are bent on destruction, literally. And they're the ones who are behind much of the attacks on Israel from Hezbollah, from the Gaza Strip. It's the same spirit, this prince of Persia. And so it is bent on destroying Israel, but God is bent on redeeming Israel. So not going to happen. So I believe, this is a continual. You talk about spiritual things behind the physical. There's a war between Michael and the Prince of Persia behind Netanyahu, behind all this, and it's going to go until it's fulfilled.
And we know who wins.
Yes,
Rabbi, Return of the Gods, your newest book, Jonathan Cahn, New York Times bestselling book. You can get this anywhere. Amazon, your local bookstore. Anything else you want to say about how people can contact you?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, you can get it anywhere. I pray that people get it not just for themselves, but for people in their lives, because everybody has people in their lives who are subject big time in this, and that God would use it to free them. The other thing is that a little while back, the Lord gave it the opening to have a motion picture in theaters across America. By the way, Jimmy, and I'm just saying it to the glory of God. By God's grace, when it came out, it was the number 2 movie in America, just under Doctor Strange, Marvel's Doctor Strange. So God used it. But if you missed it or you saw it, it's now streaming everywhere on Amazon Prime. If you can get the DVD. If you go to harbinger-of-things-to-come.com, harbinger-of-things-to-come.com, that's the name of the movie, or Amazon Prime, it's everywhere. But Jimmy, it's always a blessing to be with you. And I just heard we're going to be together with Perry, our friend Perry Stone.
Yeah.
That'll be a blessing too, but always a blessing for what you're doing. From the day we first met in New York City, I've always been blessed by your ministry tremendously.
You're a dear friend, and you're the most brilliant end times guy I know, and I tell everybody that. Your materials are just, they freak me out. I mean, it's just, and they're so enlightening and so encouraging, but you just bring the ancient history to today and just prove God is in all these things that are happening. And we know who's going to win. Bless you, my friend. We'll see you next time. God bless you.
Okay, God bless you.
Thanks, everybody, for joining me for the Tipping Point Show. I'll see you next time right here.